Angelo, the chairman, Meli was a prominent figure in the Detroit underworld during the early to mid-20th century. He played a critical role in the development and consolidation of organized crime in Detroit and was heavily involved in illicit activities such as bootlegging, gambling, and labor racketeering. Here's a look at his life, criminal history, and his influence in different cities across America. Early life in Sicily and immigration to the U.S. Angelo Meli was born in San Cataldo, Sicily, on February 10, 1897. Like many Italian immigrants of that era, he moved to the United States in the early 1900s. He settled in Detroit, Michigan, a hub for many Sicilian immigrants. His early life in Detroit saw him quickly getting involved in local crime syndicates, particularly during Prohibition. Rise in Detroit's organized crime. By the 1920s, Angelo Meli had become deeply entrenched in the criminal underworld, particularly with the Purple Gang, a notorious Jewish and Italian mob that controlled much of Detroit's liquor distribution during Prohibition. Meli and his associates capitalized on the illegal alcohol trade, making vast sums of money and expanding their operations into gambling, loan sharking, and protection rackets. As Prohibition came to an end, Meli shifted his focus to labor racketeering and gambling. He was instrumental in helping consolidate power among Detroit's mafia factions, forming the Detroit Partnership, sometimes referred to as the Detroit Outfit. His nickname, the Chairman, reflected his role as a mediator and leader within Detroit's mafia families. Involvement in national organized crime. Meli wasn't just a local figure. He had significant ties to national organized crime. He was known to have relationships with mafia figures from other cities, including New York and Chicago. Meli worked closely with mobsters like Joe Zerilli, William Tocco, and other high-ranking figures in the national syndicate. Meli played a key role in the national expansion of the mob, attending various mob meetings and helping coordinate efforts between crime families in different regions. For instance, he was involved in the infamous 1946 Havana Conference, a major meeting of organized crime figures from across the country, including the likes of Lucky Luciano and Meyer Lansky. Meli's presence at such meetings underscores his influence beyond Detroit. Murders and notoriety. Though Angelo Meli was known for his shrewdness and leadership, he was also tied to numerous acts of violence, especially during the bloody conflicts that characterized organized crime in the first half of the 20th century. His involvement in the Detroit mob naturally linked him to various murders, particularly during the gang wars of the 1920s and 1930s. Meli was also suspected to have played a role in various mob-related killings. For example, the assassination of Charles King Solomon in Boston in 1933 was rumored to have been influenced by Detroit's mob, though it's unclear whether Meli had direct involvement. However, unlike more notorious mafia bosses, Meli managed to avoid high-profile convictions for murder or other serious charges, as he kept a relatively low profile in terms of public persona, even as his power and influence grew. Detroit's mafia power broker. In the 1940s and 1950s, Meli continued to strengthen his influence within Detroit's mafia, controlling vast gambling operations. By this time, Meli had established himself as one of the most important figures in Detroit organized crime, operating behind the scenes while avoiding much public or legal scrutiny. In addition to gambling, Meli and his associates infiltrated legitimate businesses and labor unions, extending their reach into Detroit's industries. His influence within the city's labor unions gave him significant power in controlling strikes and extorting businesses. Final years and death. As Meli aged, he became less active in day-to-day operations, though he continued to hold a great deal of influence over Detroit's organized crime operations. He maintained his position as a senior figure within the Detroit Partnership until his death. Angelo Meli passed away on December 1, 1969, at the age of 72, reportedly from natural causes. Unlike many of his counterparts in organized crime, he died peacefully, rather than succumbing to assassination or arrest. His death marked the end of an era for Detroit's mafia, though the organization he helped build continued to operate long after. Influence in other cities. While Meli was primarily based in Detroit, his connections with mafia figures across the country, including New York, Chicago, and even Miami, showed his reach beyond the Midwest. He was a respected and feared figure in organized crime nationwide, facilitating cooperation and alliances between different mafia factions. Documentary perspective. A documentary on Angelo Meli might delve into his Sicilian roots, tracing his rise to power through the tumultuous years of Prohibition, the gangland wars in Detroit, and his quiet, strategic approach to organized crime. It would likely include interviews with historians, retired law enforcement officials, and potentially even descendants of mafia families to explore his role in shaping Detroit's underworld and his contribution to national organized crime. The film could also explore Meli's secretive nature, contrasting him with more flamboyant mobsters of his era, and delve into some of the key murders and criminal activities that marked his career. As the chairman, he was more of a strategist and power broker, avoiding the limelight while wielding significant influence behind the scenes. In sum, Angelo, the chairman, Meli's life was one of strategic power, careful maneuvering, and ruthless ambition. From the streets of Detroit to the corridors of national organized crime, he left a legacy as one of the most influential mafia figures in American history. Thanks for tuning into Sika True Crime Docs. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more captivating tales. Your support helps us keep bringing these stories to life. See you in the next episode.